I'd like to welcome now to the stage Tyler Hamman, Basin Electric's Vice President of Government Relations. Tyler.
Thank you. Good morning. As mentioned, my name is Tyler Hamman. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations. New to this role since the last annual meeting and possibly a new face to many, so if I have not had the privilege of meeting you yet, please don't be a stranger today. In the world of politics and policymaking, we do our best to manage expectations as the wheels of government churn slowly and outcomes are often uncertain. However, this past year was one in which persistence and commitment to the long game greatly paid off, and a number of our priorities came to fruition with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Indicative of how contentious the process has become, approval of the IRA was a hyper-partisan and controversial process that was passed by a razor-thin margin. Putting aside big-picture concerns about the IRA as a whole, included within several hundred pages of legislative text were 11 pages that enacted a years-long priority for the cooperative family: direct pay for energy tax credits. The Renewable Production Tax Credit was first enacted in 1992, and numerous other tax credits to incentivize various energy technologies have followed since. So for 3 decades, cooperatives have been at a disadvantage in utilizing these tax incentives simply due to our member-owned, not-for-profit business structure. As Basin Electric and other GNTs set out to deploy new energy technology, the full value of those incentives can now remain within the cooperative, down to the member at the end of the line. As much as the phrase game changer can be cliche, I believe it is utterly true with regard to this new opportunity. However, Congress did not just stop there. The Inflation Reduction Act also made several improvements to the existing suite of tax incentives, including the production tax credit, the 45Q carbon capture tax credit, as well as new incentives for hydrogen and advanced materials and battery manufacturing that will help spur new domestic industries. Finally, there was also nearly $10 billion made available through the Rural Utilities Service, specifically to help cooperatives invest in and deploy new energy technology. As Basin Electric continues to explore cost-effective technology that can provide reliable power in a carbon-constrained future, the incentives made available by the IRA, combined with direct pay, provide significant opportunity. While much remains to be seen, the IRA could open the door to technologies such as carbon capture, small modular nuclear reactors, or other options that might not have been economically feasible prior to the IRA being signed into law. I'd be remiss if I also didn't mention last year's enactment of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the funds made available for cooperatives to invest in new infrastructure, improve their systems to meet new member needs, and to pursue economic opportunities. As excited as I am about these policy provisions, I want to remain cognizant of the fact that these acts of Congress represent trillions in new spending that we and several generations of future taxpayers will be responsible for funding. In that regard, it is incumbent on all of us within the cooperative family to ensure that these opportunities available now are put to use in such a manner that benefits current members while setting future members up for continued success. And getting these legislative priorities over the finish line was no accident. The credit goes to all of you in this room who took the time over the last few years to engage in what the cooperative family does best, besides delivering affordable and reliable electricity: grassroots advocacy. Even in the midst of a pandemic, you, our members, our statewide organizations, and NRECA kept at it to organize virtual meetings or make other accommodations to connect with elected officials and continue to advocate for these policies. Regardless of the ultimate vehicle, it was this ground game that set the stage for success. And this all brings me to the individuals directly responsible for writing and passing legislation. As you look across the states that make up Basin's membership, we are collectively blessed with congressional representation that punches far above our weight. Members of Congress from across our region serve in congressional leadership, as well as key House and Senate committees, including senior members of the Senate Finance Committee that is responsible for tax legislation, including direct pay. One of those members, Senator Daines from Montana, sent in a short video highlighting the work he has done to support rural America, which we'll now play for you.
Senator Steve Daines here. And a big thank you for the important work you're doing to keep the lights on and provide folks with reliable and affordable energy. For the sake of our economy and national security, I am keeping up the fight in the U.S. Senate to ensure our country remains energy dominant. And this means promoting an all-of-the-above energy portfolio, which includes everything from hydropower to coal. I look forward to continuing our work together to support common sense policies that support your efforts and promote Made in America and Made in Montana energy. Enjoy the rest of your event.
Thank you to Senator Daines for sharing that message with us and for all of your support. We also have a short message from another member of Congress who was instrumental in driving energy and agriculture policy. As a senior member of the Senate Energy, Agriculture, and Appropriations Committees, Senator John Hoeven has played a huge role in supporting the energy industry in North Dakota and will be front and center of the upcoming Farm Bill debates. But I'll let you hear more from him.
Thank you for the invitation to your annual meeting. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. Our state's electric cooperatives play a central role in delivering the affordable and reliable power that every home and business relies on. Further, due to the efforts of you and other energy producers, North Dakota is an energy exporter. That means families across the region can be confident that the lights will turn on when they reach for the switch. Thank you for this essential contribution to our state and nation. As a member of the Senate Energy Committee, I'm working to provide the tools needed to ensure your continued success. This includes pushing back on the harmful tax and regulatory agenda being advanced by the Biden administration. President Biden needs to take the handcuffs off our energy producers and empower them to utilize the full potential of our abundant energy resources, including our vast coal reserves. At the same time, we continue working to advance CCUS technology to help secure coal's continued role in the nation's energy mix. We've worked for nearly 15 years to establish North Dakota's leadership in developing this technology. As a result, our state is the ideal location for CCUS, with at least 5 projects either operating or being developed in North Dakota, including at the Dakota Gasification Company. At the federal level, we've worked to provide and strengthen the tools needed to implement this technology, like the 45Q tax credit and loan guarantees to help finance carbon capture and storage projects. Through these and other efforts, our state is positioned to crack the code on this critical energy technology. Doing so will not only support our coal producers, but help ensure America is energy secure. That's not only about building a stronger economy. Energy security is national security, and Basin plays an important role. Thank you again for your hard work, and best wishes for an enjoyable and productive meeting.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven, and a wholehearted congratulations on your re-election last night. Now, it is my privilege to introduce our speaker, someone well situated to talk about the dynamic that last night's election results will bring to Washington, D.C. in the next 2 years ahead. Senator Kevin Cramer was elected to the United States Senate in 2018 after serving 3 terms as North Dakota's sole member of the House of Representatives. Congress is only one chapter in a long career of public service, including as a regulator with the North Dakota Public Service Commission. He is uniquely positioned as a member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee and the Senate Banking Committee to provide critical oversight over many issues impacting our industry. He is a great friend to Basin Electric and the cooperative family, the son of a rural electric lineman, and a great leader in Washington. Please help me welcome Senator Cramer.
Thanks, Tyler. Thank you. My staff wrote a really nice long speech, and I left it down there, so sorry, guys. I wrote a couple of notes here. I know we're all looking for some good news these days, and aren't you glad that everything got settled last night in the election so we can just move forward without any drama at all? Wow. I don't think I could do an analysis of what happened in the election last night, because now we have election days that turn into weeks. It takes, big states a long time to count. But maybe we'll get into it in a little bit. But here's what I do know. That a lot of people look at what happened last night and they say, wow, we are such a divided nation. And there's truth to that. But what I think something like last night shows us, just like the last election did, and the 50-50 Senate that I serve in did, and how the House that was narrowly divided one way, will now probably be narrowly divided the other way. In other words, what we are is we are divided, but we're narrowly divided. I prefer to see the glass is half full. I think we're narrowly divided. That presents opportunity. So I'm going to be an opportunist going into this next term, because whatever happens in the counting and the recounting and I guess we'll have to have another race in Georgia on December 6th probably. So we have a runoff. And whatever happens, we're narrowly divided. And narrow division means that there shouldn't be such a big void. So let's try to get together. Here's the other good news for the day. I took my snowblower, moved it to the edge of the garage right in front of the door, and it started on the first pull, and I didn't start it all summer. So that's the other good news. I just need to fill the tank. It was interesting listening to the financial report, and we can't do a unanimous consent voice vote and name a post office in the United States Senate. And you guys just accept the financial report just like that. That's a tribute to the management. So good job, everybody, on that. I also am reminded when I listened to the financial report, we were talking a little bit in the back of the room. As Tyler said, I have a long history with rural electric cooperatives growing up in the home of a rural electric lineman. And then I married, of course, a Basin Electric employee, and her mother-in-law my mother-in-law, her mother was a director at Baker Electric, Northern Plains Electric, and of course I was a regulator, and the co-ops used to always sort of chuckle at the notion that I had nothing to say about their rates. And I said, yeah, but you have to face my mother-in-law. That's way harder than face me. And I say that somewhat affectionately, but also seriously, because I just think your model is fantastic. I just think the cooperative model is fantastic. When you have to answer to the customer for the rates, literally, I don't know how anybody could argue with that. And here's what I also, and then I want to get into some substance here. The other thing about your model, about the rural electric model, the cooperative model, I should say, that's been so great is in this fight, in this battle, in this transition to as I think Tyler called it, a carbon-constrained future. Let's all admit it, right? America, the world wants us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. How fast we do it, what kind of technologies we use to do it, what the cost of it, all that we can debate. But this is what they want. And what I love about the cooperative model is that you're the ones holding our feet to the fire, the policymakers' feet to the fire, because you have to answer to your customers for the cost of the new technologies and the policies. And so you're very, very helpful. So Tyler introduces himself in this new position. You all probably knew him before this new title. But people like Tyler and Gene and the others before them, they are really an extension of all of us. They're an extension of all of us. And when I say all of us, I mean those of us in the policy arena in Washington. We rely a lot on your shop. I want you to know that. And that's good. In fact, it was fun to watch my colleagues, Senator Daines, of course, who's a very good friend. He and I were classmates in the House before coming over to the Senate. Of course, Senator Hoeven, my colleague, my mentor in many respects. Tyler did a good job of teeing up their credentials. I mean, Steve, a senior member of the Finance Committee, John, a member of Energy and Natural Resources, as well as Appropriations and Agriculture, me being on Environment and Public Works and Banking. This was the beauty of our founders when they created the Senate. I spent those 6 years in the House of Representatives as North Dakota's only member. All that meant is that I had 434 colleagues who don't get to be me. They have to be from somewhere else. And so Steve Daines was my colleague for a couple of years, and he did the same, representing Montana. And it means it's to get to 218 to pass something, you have to be pretty collaborative, and it's a good lesson. But then comes the Senate, and that's where the founders were genius, because they looked out for places like North Dakota and South Dakota and Montana and Wyoming and Iowa and Minnesota and the center of America. They knew that the day could come when the big cities could run over the rest of the country, and they created the United States Senate. And now everyone complains about how slowly things move in the Senate. To which I say, congratulations to the founders. Congratulations to the founders. But we also, because of equal power, are able to do big things for our constituents. And I think friends like John Hoven and Steve Daines are testimony to that. And so thank you for letting me be a part of that. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on now. John already mentioned a little bit about 45Q and the work that's been done for years on that and getting to the direct pay. And Tyler did a nice job of the details of 45Q and the $60 and $85 and the direct pay and what that means. And there's a lot of little things. Well, the worst part of the whole thing is we're still waiting for the Treasury Department to come up with the rules so that we know what to do with it. But it's a fairly prescriptive, straightforward legislation. All right. We're living in this weird time. Big election last night. Everybody thought there'd be a red wave. There wasn't. It could very well be that Republicans will be in control of one chamber, maybe in both chambers. Whatever the case may be, again, we're narrowly divided. And probably we will see a divided government. Again, I happen to think that when you have both parties in control of some portion of the two chambers and the presidency, it forces us to come together. I try to work together with people. I am actually the ranking member on the Transportation Infrastructure Subcommittee. I never once flinched from the responsibility of being for the infrastructure bill. I helped draft a good part of it. I helped draft a lot of the water stuff, a lot of the highway stuff. I would like to have had a better process than we ended up with, but we ended up with a pretty good bill that paved the way for lots of investment that's taking place. But we're equipped to do it as long as we're incentivized to do it. And I think this election, whatever happens, helps equip us for that. But we are living in this weird time when just the last weekend before the election, our president talks about how we're getting rid of all of the coal plants and I have no plans for any more drilling. But what about all that other stuff about how it's big oil companies' faults and it's the utilities' faults and we're that's the refineries' faults that gas prices are so high, that energy prices are so high? I guess we got more of the truth of the matter over this last weekend. So we've got some work to do with this guy, for sure. But what I can't understand is why does anybody want to oversee hyperinflation? Why does anybody want us to acquiesce our excellence to somebody else's mediocrity? I was a state regulator, as you know. John Hoven was a state governor, as you know. I would never want to trade North Dakota's exceptionalism for the federal government's mediocrity. And yet that's what they're asking us to do. I love quoting my friend Joe Manchin from time to time. He called the president divorced from reality. Divorced from reality. That's what he said about him this last weekend. But you also had Willie Sparks here to talk about some of the geopolitical opportunities, and that's where I want to land for a little bit. Because I think he's right on with some things. You guys, again, I want to go back to the fact that the American people really overwhelmingly want us to deal with climate change. Now, we can all debate whether it's real. We can debate about how real it is. We can debate about how severe it is. We can debate about whose fault it is. We can debate about all of that, except that the American people want us to do something about it. The question then becomes, whose solutions are we going to put on the table? Are we going to put Washington's solutions on the table? Are we going to put North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota's solutions on the table? Are we going to put industry's solutions on the table? Or are we going to put Europe's solutions on the table? One of the things about the geopolitical climate these days when it comes to energy and climate, literally, is that we don't want to follow the European model. And in case we doubt it, Vladimir Putin reminded us of it. You guys, I don't mind telling you that I've only had one conversation with Joe Biden. He's not that easy a guy to get a hold of. But it was a conversation I had about just a few hours after landing back in Washington, D.C. from my trip to Ukraine, about 2 weeks before the shooting started. And I said, sir, I'm just going to tell you what President Zelensky, what his energy minister, what his defense minister, what his interior minister all said. You have weaponized energy. And we had a robust disagreement about that. And he didn't believe me and he wouldn't accept it, and I get it. But the reality is, like it or not, energy has become a geopolitical, actually it's become a weapon of war in Europe. And whatever we do, we don't want to follow the European model of get rid of everything that works in hopes of something that works better. And they find themselves heading into a very cold winter, ill-prepared. But what they would like is help from us. And we're not stepping up to the plate very darn well. In fact, I think we've squandered an entire spring and summer when we could have been doing more to produce more here in the United States of America, particularly natural gas, but also the innovations that they seek to meet the climate goals that they have. And I think this is the opportunity we have, ladies and gentlemen, right here in the heartland of America, to lead the rest of America in a leadership role to the world. I like geopolitical things. I'm also on the Senate Armed Services Committee. It's my most important role in the Senate for sure. I don't mind telling you. I don't apologize for it. We've got big things going on in the world. It's a very unsafe place. And we have important assets here in our region, in your territory, as you know. You probably provide the electricity pretty much to every base that's in your territory. And there's some pretty important ones. Two of the three legs of the nuclear triad in Minot alone. ICBM missiles both in Montana and Wyoming. They need round-the-clock power, very reliable power. And so we have this incredible blessing of natural resources here in the United States and here in the heartland. But we also have the edge of all edges, and that is we have innovation. We are the innovative leaders of the world. And we have a capitalist system that incentivizes it. But we need to be at the table on the global stage. This was, as I think maybe we've talked about before when I've been here, this was, I think, one of the mistakes that we hastily made, and I say we loosely, the country, in sitting out the Paris Accords in the days when a lot of things were being decided. I think we should have taken our leadership to the head of the table and put China to the back of the table and dictated the terms in our terms, the United States of America, and what's good for our allies. And we have opportunities now, ladies and gentlemen, in this geopolitical moment to be that shining city on a hill for the world in the very area that they think they're superior to us in. And that is cleaner, alternative forms of energy using existing fuel sources. And that's why 45Q is so important. This is why it was so offensive that the president the other day just trashed all coal production, trashed coal-generated electricity, said we're not going to have any more of it, and then while he was at it, a couple of weeks ago he gave that crazy statement about how it's the oil companies' fault that gas prices are high, that they're unpatriotic, and so because they're not reinvesting these record profits. It's like, you won't let them reinvest the record profits, Mr. President. You've got to get out of their way, and they'd love to reinvest their profits in producing more energy. But you've got to give them the incentives to do it, or at least take away the disincentives from doing it. And then you darn sure can't punish them with more taxes and expect the prices to go down. Basic economics. So we have this moment, we have this opportunity, we have this responsibility. And 45Q is a great tool for our innovators to find the solution. And then for us to show it off. One of my favorite things about being a senator from North Dakota, as much as I don't love legislating, but I do kind of like building coalitions and alliances and adding things up and getting to 60 and all of those things. I do like it. But what I really like is being an ambassador for the ideas that come from this very place. When Senator Mike Crapo called me and said, after I was elected and it was Christmas before going to be sworn in, and he said, would you be willing to serve on the banking committee? Maybe I've told you this story. I said, well, I don't know. Mitch McConnell told me he won't allow any freshmen on the banking committee. He said, no, I'd like you on the banking committee. He was the chairman. I said, but I'm not a finance guy, but you were economic development director. I said, yeah, but I was more of a promoter. That's why I want you on the banking committee, he said. So we get all this ESG nonsense where, I better be careful. Anyway, where the the younger employees at the large banks are listening to the activist investors and the big retirement funds, and they're they're putting up all these crazy criteria because they want to be cool. They want to meet the climate objectives of somebody. Except they wanted to blow up the United States economy in the process. I don't think they really wanted to, but that's what they were doing. If you read some of their statements, and I won't name the names and recite their statements, but some of them are just crazy, where they pick the fuel and just say, we'll never do that again. As though that would somehow, as though not having electricity would somehow solve their problems. So they count on guys like you, men and women like the board of, and the members of Basin Electric and your utilities, to do the right thing while they can talk smart at the cocktail parties. So I kind of got fed up and introduced some legislation in the banking committee that suddenly had 34 co-sponsors, and pretty soon Jamie Dimon calls me, and David Solomon from Goldman Sachs calls, and Brian Moynihan and Jane Fraser from Citi, and all these big bank presidents call me, and they want to come and talk to me. And so we start talking about climate goals. How do we transition? I said, let me help you. Let me help you. Why don't you come to North Dakota, meet some real people in the energy sector, including fossils, by the way, and let me show you opportunities to get to the transition you're talking about without destroying the American economy. And so they've been coming one by one. And I have to say, one of my favorites, and I know this is being streamed out, and so he'll probably get it, but one of my favorites was when Brian Moynihan, the president of Bank of America, came. And Brian was a tough nut to crack. He's a very serious fellow, of course. He's very analytical, lives in Manhattan. But he was interested. And so I started a series called Bully Pulpit. And Basin always has some folks there, and all the other companies that have everything from carbon capture, utilization, storage, horizontal drilling, hydrogen, obviously the above energy, pipelines, transmission lines, all of the things that we've always done. And Brian Moynihan comes and he sits and listens to these presentations, asks tough questions, and a few months later, in the banking committee, we've got the 7 largest banks CEOs in front of us, and Brian Moynihan in his opening statement says, and I went with Senator Kramer to North Dakota, and you wouldn't believe the things they're doing over there at that EERC at UND. He said, and now my bank is a major investor in one of their carbon capture projects. We just had to show it to them, to show them our excellence, because it's not intuitive for some guy on the 800th floor of a building in Manhattan to think about coming out here. Later that night, I went with Brian Moynihan to Manhattan to his bank to speak to a group of about 50 CEOs. You'd know some of them by name. A few ambassadors, UN ambassadors and others from around the world, for a dinner and a fireside chat. He turned the tables on me. He put me in the witness chair and asked me the questions in front of the CEOs for dinner entertainment. Pretty lame, huh? And I'm not kidding you guys. All I did was told stories about North Dakota projects. Yeah, what about this? They say, but what about that? What about tax policy? Why do you trash the production tax credit for wind, but you're happy to take 45Q? That was an easy one. So, well, because one's brand new and the other one's been around for 30 years. I love emerging technology. Sometimes it takes the aggregated generosity of the American taxpayer to get something off the ground. But it shouldn't take forever if it makes economic sense. And afterwards, some of the biggest CEOs in Manhattan were there. And one in particular that I won't name, but he came up to me and he said, "What is it about you guys in North Dakota?" He said, "I hear more good things coming from that part of the country." I said, "It's because we're innovators, we're problem solvers. It's cold as hell. I mean, we have to create ways to survive and grow food for a hungry world and energy for a growing economy. We can be the solution. We can be the solution. And frankly, I'm tired of apologizing for America's exceptionalism on the world stage. We have to start taking credit for our exceptionalism. All right. One of the areas that I've been working on the most, besides permitting reform, which I can get to in a little bit if you want me to, but is, I dared utter the words, and I dared sign on to since the last time we met, I did a letter to the editor, or an op-ed, and it was on the suggestion that perhaps we should look at some sort of a carbon border adjustment mechanism. Maybe we talked about this a little bit last year, but I hadn't penned the op-ed yet. And I did it with General McMaster. He and I co-authored it. And we threw it out there. And pretty soon, a whole bunch of people on all sides, in the entire spectrum, came with their ideas. Republicans and Democrats, colleagues from all parts of our country, fellow senators. Some wanted more of a carbon tax, a domestic carbon tax. Said, nope, that won't go anywhere politically. Others came with their version of sort of a cap and trade with a very complicated scheme. I said, keep it simple, stupid. I'm a simple guy. And I think we're finally sort of settling down on something that rewards American innovation and our allies who are like-minded, while isolating our adversaries who are not. Let me give you an example of what happens if we just let a global market just run its course. It'd be great if we were all on the same page. But just one example, getting back to the war in Ukraine and natural gas as a weapon. Vladimir Putin's natural gas produced in Russia and sent by pipeline, say Nord Stream if you want to pick a name, to our friends in Europe, emits 40% more greenhouse gas than American natural gas liquefied and put on a ship and sent to the same location. Now, you guys, I reject the notion that every transaction in Washington requires a winner and a loser. I think we should find more opportunities like that story to find winners and winners, whatever your goals might be. And we can talk about bringing up the price of things, but you guys, our adversaries, whether it's China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, Venezuela, they're not only polluters, they're human rights violators, they're labor violators. Our stuff always costs more because we do it better. We do it cleaner. And if we have a coalition of like-minded nations with the same values roughly, we don't have to apologize for our exceptionalism. We can take advantage of our exceptionalism. The world will be safer, the air will be cleaner, the climate will be better, and we'll all be better for it. Now, we're doing a little thing on permitting reform. You probably have heard about it. Joe Manchin had this crazy bad idea. It was the big deal, right? He would agree to spending a whole bunch of money in a straight party line vote, and in exchange, the president and Chuck Schumer promised him permitting reform. Except that it was permitting reform that all it really did was it green lighted a gas pipeline in West Virginia. Other than that, it didn't do anything good. And by the way, your association was really against it because it gave FERC all kinds of authority it doesn't have, including cost allocation, including micro-siting authority. And so I've been working with a little group on some permitting reform that we would come up with around here, common sense type of things that provide some guidance, provide a little oversight, but still empower the local and state governments with their stakeholders. And to make darn sure that you and your customers don't have to pay for somebody else's transmission line for some special purpose that they want it for, say in Minneapolis or something. So we're working through all of that as we speak. But it was funny, one day Joe, after he had introduced this idea. He's never really ever introduced a bill, but the idea that we'd give FERC, or we'd give NEPA 2 years to run its course. I said, well, first of all, that's not very ambitious. I guess it is based on recent history. But real permitting reform takes away the chronological, permitting, agency by agency by agency, and replaces it with concurrent. In other words, let's streamline the process without compromising the integrity of environmental oversight. We do that all the time up here in this part of the world. When I was on the Public Service Commission, I wasn't the expert on artifacts or geography or geology or hydrology or historical or any of it. All those other agencies were. We just refereed the process so it took months instead of years. I love telling this story about permitting reform. When Tony Clark and I, Bob Sars is around here, he remembers those days. When Tony Clark and I were on the Public Service Commission, and at that time Brian Kalk, I think was the other commissioner, it might have been Susan. Hess came to us with an application in 2010, on June 25th, an application to expand the Tioga gas plant 250 million cubic feet per day. That's kind of a big deal. Big legacy plant, lots of energy. June 25th, did I mention that? June 25th, 2010. For whatever reason, it took us 2 months to have the hearing. We finally went up on August 30th of 2010 to the City Hall in Tioga and had a hearing. And I guess we didn't have a meeting scheduled for 8 days, so it took us until September 8th to issue the permit. That's permitting reform. Not turning 1 year into 2 years into 10 years into forever so that we just give up. Folks, and I'll wrap up with just this sort of oversight, or this general statement. Coming from where we come from, where people just naturally get along, where people just naturally look for opportunities to do business. They naturally look for ways to improve their communities. We naturally look to our neighbors for assistance and for ways that we can be helpful. We are the exceptional place in our country. We are the moral compass. When I say we, I'm talking about Basin territory. We provide the work ethic, we provide the brains, we provide the decency, we provide the stewardship that's exceptional. And Washington can screw it up every time. The bureaucracy works against us at every turn. Sometimes they're even not bad people, although sometimes I give them too much credit. So I was asked by Harvard Law School to write an essay for this year's journal. And so I have a Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, volume 45, number 2. And they published it in June. I wrote 22 pages on restoring states' rights and adhering to cooperative federalism in environmental policy. I didn't bring copies for everybody. I know you were hoping to get one. But you can get it online. What I did is I wrote 22 pages using all examples from North Dakota of ways that North Dakota did it right versus the ways that Washington always gets it wrong. I am so glad that you are not just, not just energy producers and distributors and infrastructure builders, but leaders in every community. I know you know this. I know growing up in little Kindred, North Dakota, Cass County Electric was, they provided all of the leadership in the community. And they provide the economy of a small community. You know all of that. But you're so much more than that, because collectively, you punch way above your weight class. We all do, because we have each other, because we have this. Do you know, when I'm in Washington, this last spring, and this was the first year that things really opened up enough for all of the student groups to come again, the 4-H, FFA, all the various high school groups, and I think I took about 500 students to the Capitol steps and did town halls over the course of the spring. The blessing is this, and I always tell them, you're going to see Bernie Sanders walk by and you're going to want a selfie, and you should get one if you can. But you're going to see Chuck Schumer walk by, and Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio, and they don't get to talk to the students that come from their states. Not because they don't want to, not because they wouldn't benefit tremendously from it, but because they just can't. And I get to. And that means you all have a greater influence over the affairs of the world, because you have greater influence over the United States Senate, because you know John and Kevin and Steve and the other John and the other John and Mike and the other Mike and Cynthia and the other John, because you know us personally. So we just get to carry the ball for you, nicely packaged up and handed off. And that's good for you, it's good for us, and even though they don't know it, it's really good for the people of New York and California and Massachusetts and Oregon and all places in between. Thank you for letting me leave my speech down there and get up here and just visit a little bit about what's on my heart. You guys, we are still the greatest nation in the world. I am the 10th great-grandson of William Bradford, who came to the new country on the Mayflower and spent 31 years as the governor of Plymouth Colony. A day doesn't go by that I don't wake up and go, yeah, this is still the greatest place on earth. Don't get down about anything that happens in the election. Just know that we can do it together. Thank you. God bless you.